At 6:47 am on a cold November morning, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona stepped to the microphones outside the Phoenix Federal Courthouse. His voice was steady. His words were surgical. He announced the culmination of a 3-year investigation that had uncovered what federal prosecutors were calling the most devastating corruption network ever discovered within American law enforcement. The figure was staggering: $890 million in documented bribes, 180 officers compromised across 6 counties, and at the center of it all, a man sworn to protect and serve, the state's own police chief. This is not a story about bad luck or bad actors operating in isolation. This is the story of how an entire state's criminal justice system was bought, one badge at a time. And what I am about to show you is far worse than you think. 4:32 a.m. Tucson, Arizona. The streets were silent, wrapped in the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then stopped. The fog rolled in slow and heavy off the desert, swallowing streetlights, blurring the edges of buildings. This was the hour when ordinary people slept and when men who controlled empires moved their product through the dark. But tonight, the dark belonged to someone else. 23 black Suburbans rolled through the intersection of Congress and Church, engines cut to near silent, headlights killed. Inside, FBI tactical operators and DEA special response teams sat in formation, earpieces crackling with encrypted chatter. Behind them, 4 ICE HSI units followed in separate convoy. Then, 3 SWAT transports with rotating amber lights switched off. No sirens. No warnings. Just silence and steel moving toward targets that had no idea what was about to hit them. The operation was code-named Northern Shield, and it had been built from the ground up over 36 months of undercover work, wiretaps, financial forensics, and the kind of patience that federal prosecutors pride themselves on. At 4:38 a.m., the first breach came at a warehouse on South Nogle Highway, a building that appeared on city records as a cold storage facility for a lettuce import company. Inside, agents found a fully operational methamphetamine superlab capable of producing 600 pounds of product per cycle. The chemical smell hit them like a wall. The air was thick with the sharp metallic sting of meth. The lab had 12 industrial reactors. Drying racks ran the full length of a 100-foot room. And in a corner office with reinforced steel doors, agents found 2 men in full tactical gear, with AK-47s standing guard over 6 duffel bags that contained, by initial estimate, $11 million in unlaundered cash. 3 blocks away, ICE breached a massage parlor on Grant Road. The front operation had been running for 7 years. Inside, hidden behind a false wall in the back office, they found a tunnel that ran beneath the building and connected to a storm drainage system that led directly to a railroad spur used by freight convoys moving south toward the border. The tunnel was reinforced. It had lighting. It had ventilation. It was, in every sense, professional infrastructure, built not by a street gang, but by an organization that understood logistics and supply chains at a corporate level. At 4:51 a.m., FBI teams simultaneously hit 12 locations across Tucson, Phoenix, Flagstaff, and Yuma. Among them, 3 cartel-connected restaurants used as cash drop locations, 2 used car lots flagged as fronts for vehicle smuggling, a nonprofit charity that had received over $4 million in supposedly tax-deductible donations, all from shell accounts traced back to a cartel financial cell in Culiacan. And then, at 5:03 a.m., they breached the fortress. A compound in the Catalina foothills. 2 acres. Stone walls. Guard booths. Security cameras covering every approach. The owner was listed as a real estate developer from Sonora. He was also the brother-in-law of the man who had commanded this entire operation, the state police chief himself. Inside the compound, agents found a weapons cache that would make a militia jealous. 42 rifles, including fully automatic M4 variants. 12 hand grenades. Body armor. Night vision equipment, and in a subterranean vault beneath the wine cellar, they found something that made every investigator in that room go very quiet. A server rack. Running. Humming. Covered in dust but operational. And on the screen, a live feed, dozens of cameras, not outside the compound. inside police stations, inside the state attorney's office, inside the evidence room at the Department of Public Safety headquarters. The state police chief had built his own surveillance network, watching his own people from the shadows. By 6:15 a.m., the numbers were still climbing. 18 tons of methamphetamine seized across all sites, 14 tons of cocaine, 2.1 million fentanyl pills recovered from a single warehouse in Phoenix, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in the state twice over. $147 million in cash, counted and logged. 31 properties seized, valued collectively at over $400 million. And 53 suspects in custody, including 12 active duty officers from the state police force itself. But the cash and the drugs were not the real story. The real story was what came next. 8 a.m. FBI Cyber Division Field Office, Phoenix. The server rack from the Catalina compound had been transported under armed escort and was now sitting in a climate-controlled forensic lab inside a building that had no external signage. Agent Maria Delgado, a 10-year veteran of the FBI's cybercrime division, stood in front of a 6-monitor setup with a cup of cold coffee that she had not had time to touch. She had been staring at this screen for 3 hours, and she was only beginning to understand the scope of what she was looking at. The encryption had taken 11 hours to break. The algorithm was military grade, something the cartel had either purchased or been given access to by someone with defense industry connections. But once it broke, the data spilled open like a wound, files organized by codename after codename. And at the top of the directory tree, one master label in bold capital letters, Operation Iron Gate. That was the name the state police chief had given to his network, and the structure underneath it was unlike anything the prosecutors had seen. The financial web was a masterpiece of layered deception. 218 shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming, and the Cayman Islands. Each one technically legal. Each one a fiction. Restaurant chains, moving companies, agricultural supply firms, import-export businesses, even a chain of pet supply stores that generated enough daily cash transactions to launder tens of millions without triggering a single audit. Money moved from Arizona to Houston to Panama City to Bogota in cycles designed to confuse even the most sophisticated financial investigators, and at every node, at every transfer point, a digital signature. An encrypted key. A badge number. His badge number. The investigation traced authorizations from the state police chief's personal encrypted device to specific cartel logistics operations, convoys that had moved through highway checkpoints at exactly the right moments, border crossings where inspection protocols were mysteriously suspended for exactly 18 minutes, long enough for a convoy carrying 3 tons of cocaine to pass undetected. Patrol routes that were rerouted away from known stash houses on specific nights. Investigation files that were leaked to cartel attorneys before raids could be executed. This was not corruption. This was command-level collusion. This was not negligence. This was engineered treason. At 11:47 a.m. across the state, a joint command center was activated in a classified facility outside Flagstaff. Inside, a digital map stretched across an entire wall, a live visualization of every confirmed cartel node across Arizona. Dozens of red markers pulsed simultaneously, synchronized, alive. Attorney General directives had authorized the largest coordinated law enforcement operation in the state's history, over 1,200 federal agents. 46 SWAT teams. Black Hawk helicopters from the Arizona National Guard, flying in support. Armored vehicles from the DIA's Special Testing Division, and for the first time in a domestic operation of this scale, a U.S. Navy Mobile Intelligence Unit was deployed to assist with signal intercepts and communications mapping. The raids that followed were surgical and overwhelming. In Casa Grande, a cartel superlab inside a fabricated metalworking factory was hit by DIA Special Forces. 12 workers were arrested mid-production. The facility was producing fentanyl so pure that a single gram could be cut into 5,000 doses. In Scottsdale, a mansion owned through 17 layers of offshore trusts was breached. Inside, a former deputy police chief, on the cartel payroll for over 8 years, was taken into custody with $7 million in cash in his basement and a personal armed security detail of 4 men, all former military contractors. In Yuma, near the border, agents discovered a tunnel system that stretched over a mile from a ranch house to a point just outside the U.S. border fence. The tunnel was climate-controlled. It had rail lines. It had ventilation systems powered by industrial generators, and it was connected to a network of 3 other tunnels discovered within a 5-mile radius, a full underground transit corridor designed to move both narcotics and human trafficking victims with industrial efficiency. By 7 p.m., the operation had swept through 29 cities. 211 people were in custody. 47 were current or former law enforcement officers. The seizures totaled over 28 tons of various narcotics, including methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl. 182 firearms were recovered, including machine guns and surface-to-air rocket launchers recovered from a ranch property owned by one of the cartel's military contractors. One federal prosecutor, speaking on condition of anonymity, put it simply, the underworld took more damage in 6 hours than it had in the last 6 years combined, and the investigation was only 40% complete. It was inside the forensic labs over the following weeks that the true depth of the infiltration became clear. The team pulled server logs, patrol records, internal email chains, financial transfer records, and encrypted chat logs from devices belonging to the arrested officers. What they found was not a few bad apples. It was a system, a structured, compensated, organized second police force operating inside the official one. The state police chief had established what internal documents called a parallel communication network, a secure channel through which cartel directives were transmitted to compromised officers using encrypted devices that looked like standard-issue police radios but were, secretly, modified to operate on a separate frequency. Officers were paid through shell companies that appeared to offer legitimate consulting services. Payments ranged from $5,000 a month for low-level informants to over $80,000 a month for senior officers who controlled critical checkpoint access. The documents revealed a tiered system. Level 1 officers were Border Patrol agents who flagged convoy timing windows. Level 2 were Highway Patrol officers who rerouted traffic away from known stash operations. Level 3 were detectives who leaked active investigation details to the cartel's legal team. And Level 4, the Inner Circle, were senior officials who actively used their authority to protect cartel operations, falsify evidence logs, and silence internal investigations into cartel activity. One of the most damaging revelations came from an internal email chain between the state police chief and a senior deputy commissioner. In the email, the deputy commissioner, who has since been arrested, wrote, "The checkpoint at mile marker 87 will be in maintenance mode Thursday through Saturday. Convoy can proceed without inspection." That single email, sent from an official government account using official government encryption, had facilitated the movement of over 200 kilograms of cocaine through a state checkpoint in a single weekend. The emotional toll on honest officers was immense. Federal agents interviewed over 300 state police employees during the investigation. Many of them broke down. Not from guilt, from shame. From the realization that the colleagues they had trusted, the men and women they had worked beside for years, had been selling them out from the inside. One veteran detective, a 22-year veteran with an unblemished record, told investigators that he had been scheduled to execute a raid on a suspected cartel stash house in Tucson. The raid was called off at the last moment by a deputy chief who cited insufficient evidence. The detective spent months believing the deputy chief had saved him from a dangerous operation. He learned later that the deputy chief had received a $200,000 payment from the cartel the day before the scheduled raid. The insufficient evidence was a lie. The raid was canceled because the stash house had been moved, and the deputy chief had ensured the move was uninterrupted. By the 6th week of the investigation, 180 officers had been identified as compromised. 31 had been arrested. 47 had resigned before charges could be filed. And the state police chief himself, the man who had built this empire from the shadows of his own office, was taken into custody at his personal residence in Scottsdale without incident. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply looked at the agents and waited for the cuffs. What prosecutors would reveal in the weeks that followed was that the network extended beyond Arizona. The operation had routes through New Mexico, Nevada, and California. Trucking firms flagged in financial documents showed regular shipments that appeared on paper to be agricultural produce, but were later confirmed to be commercial-grade cargo covers for multi-ton narcotics shipments. Way stations along major interstates had been flagged for scheduled maintenance on 17 separate occasions. Each time, a cartel convoy passed through without inspection. Port facilities in San Diego and Long Beach had logged cargo manifests that were later found to have been altered after initial inspection, with product swapped and reloaded before final clearance. The cartel had not simply been operating in Arizona. They had been redesigning the state's infrastructure for their own permanent use. The state police chief had been planning, according to documents recovered from his encrypted servers, a 20-year operational framework, a blueprint for ensuring that no administration, no election cycle, no change in leadership could threaten the network he had built. He had created contingency plans involving blackmail files on elected officials, fraudulent evidence planting to discredit honest investigators, and a communication protocol that would allow the network to survive even if the chief himself was removed. One federal official, briefing reporters off the record, put it in terms that were impossible to forget. The system was not just infiltrated, he said. It was redrawn. They did not need to overthrow the government. They had already moved inside it. The human cost of this operation extended far beyond the arrests and the seizures. Fentanyl alone had killed over 9,000 people in Arizona in the previous 5 years. Methamphetamine addiction rates had tripled in rural counties where cartel superlabs operated openly. Entire neighborhoods in Phoenix and Tucson had been hollowed out, families broken, children orphaned, streets colonized by violence and addiction. The drugs that flowed through the checkpoints that were supposed to stop them had filled hospitals, overwhelmed foster systems, and buried an entire generation of young people in the margins of a war they never asked to fight. This story is not about one man. It is about the silence that let him rise. It is about the ambition that mistakes power for safety. It is about the moment when a badge meant protection and became instead a tool of exploitation. And it is a warning. A reminder that organized crime does not always wear the face you expect. Sometimes it wears the uniform you trust. If you are still watching, tap like and share this story. Comment below and let your voice be heard. Because corruption like this does not survive in the light. It only survives in the silence we choose to give it.